first came to the US, people really wanted me to try this and asked how authentic it was. And I was just like, what is this? I've never heard of this before. Turns out they thought this was straight from Germany. Meanwhile, in Germany, they have no idea this even exists. Hallo, servus, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Feli. I'm originally from Munich, Germany, but I've been living here in Cincinnati, Ohio, on and off since 2016. And it still happens to this day that people here ask me about something that they're convinced is from Germany, you know, like a typical German delicacy or a dance even. Meanwhile, I've never come across that in my life. So today I want to kill some of these myths once and for all and tell you about 5 things that you might think are German that really aren't. And I think number 4 especially will shock a lot of you. The first thing on this list is something that a lot of Americans believe to be a traditional German dance, and more particularly, it's somehow associated with Oktoberfest here, the chicken dance. In German, it's called Ententanz, so duck dance, and I've mentioned this before in my videos about Oktoberfest, but no, the chicken dance is not something you'll come across at Munich Oktoberfest or any other traditional beer festival for that matter. I personally mainly know this dance from kiddie discos at vacation resorts growing up, or, you know, other kinds of children's events, but that's about it. It's definitely not a traditional German dance. In fact, it's not even from Germany. It was actually written by the Swiss music teacher Werner Thomas in the 1950s. Apparently, he owned over 100 ducks and 25 geese, which is what inspired him to the song, and he invented the dance to get the audience to move along during his accordion performances. In the 1970s and 80s, different artists all over Europe then released their own versions of the song. In 1973, a Belgian producer published it under the name Chip Chip. In 1974, a French accordion version was released, titled La Danse des Canards, so duck dance. And in 1980, the Dutch music duo De Elektronicas released it as De Vogeltjestans. That was my best try of speaking Dutch, which translates to the bird dance. This version was extremely popular in the Netherlands and also made it to #1 of the German music charts. 1 year later, in 1981, the German singer Frank Zander added German lyrics to the song and released it as Wenn wir alle Englein wären, if all of us were angels. Ja, wenn wir alle The song is basically about drinking too much wine, sleeping around, and how much fun life can be when you don't follow the rules. This song was super popular in Germany as well, and in the same year, another German artist released a parody version called Gib mir bitte einen Kuss, Please Give Me a Kiss. Gib mir bitte einen Kuss, gib mir bitte einen Kuss und sag doch du zu mir. Then in the same year, the Italian artist Romina Power released the song as Il ballo del qua qua. The British group The Tweets published their version as The Birdie Song. The Swedish band Kurt Hagers released it as Vogeldansen. And there was even a Yugoslavian version by Grupa 777 with lyrics. So 1981 was truly the year of the chicken dance all over Europe, and that's also the year that the song made it over to the US. According to several articles I found on this topic, a band just decided to play the song at an Oktoberfest celebration in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and they wanted to get a duck costume for it, but all they could find was a chicken costume. And that's the beginning of how the chicken dance became a huge part of Oktoberfest celebrations all over the US. Here at the Cincinnati Oktoberfest, they even pride themselves on hosting the world's largest chicken dance every year. In 1994, they claimed the world record with 48,000 participants. And yes, many of those people wear chicken costumes or chicken hats for this. But is it a German thing? No. Even at Munich Oktoberfest, where people do all kinds of crazy things, the chicken dance isn't really really something that takes place. I don't think I've ever even heard the song played at Oktoberfest, and people don't run around in chicken costumes either. The next one is something I had never seen in my life until I ordered a pretzel at a German restaurant here for the first time, and it came with this liquid cheese dip. And as it turns out, it's not just that one restaurant that did that, but it seems to be kind of the standard here that a soft pretzel is served with either a cheese sauce, even though here they often just refer to it as cheese, like, would you like some cheese with your pretzel? Or sometimes they give you mustard as a dip. So to clear up this myth once and for all, we neither dip our pretzels in cheese sauce nor in mustard in Germany, unless you ate something else with mustard and then kind of like use your pretzel to clean up your plate. But it's not common that when you buy a pretzel in Germany, you're handed a side of mustard with it. But apparently that's a very widespread belief here in the US. Now, when it comes to the cheese dip, here in the Midwest particularly, they usually serve what's called beer cheese, which usually has kind of an orange color to it. And if I had to describe the taste, I'd say that it tastes like melted slices of American sandwich cheese or cheddar cheese, and yeah, a hint of beer. In other parts of the country where beer cheese isn't as common, you often just get this yellow cheese sauce, kind of similar to nacho cheese dip at the movie theater. But if we don't dip our pretzels in cheese or mustard, how do we eat them in Germany? Well, in a lot of cases, we just eat them plain. What's also super common is a Butterbreze, so a butter pretzel that was cut up like a sandwich and has some butter in the middle. I know that fellow YouTuber Nelf is a huge fan of those. Sometimes they also add chives to that. There are pretzels with a baked cheese crust like this. And in Bavaria specifically, we also have this cheese spread called Oberster that's usually served with either some bread or a pretzel as part of a typical Bavarian Brotzeit. There are different recipes for this, but it's typically made from brie or camembert cheese mixed with butter, onions, and paprika powder. But it doesn't contain any beer and it's not liquid. It basically has the consistency of like a mushed up brie, so it's more like a bread spread. Now, when it comes to beer cheese, I should say that there are different cheeses in Germany and Austria that are called Bierkäse, so literally beer cheese, but those are all just regular types of hard cheeses and have nothing to do with the cheese dip here in the US. Because that was actually invented in Kentucky in the 1930s, right outside of Lexington, so only about 1.5 hours south of Cincinnati. So it makes sense that it's more common in this part of the country. And I will say that while I'm definitely not a big fan of pretzels with nacho cheese, beer cheese is actually pretty good, especially with like the softer type of pretzels that they usually serve here. Apparently, even the Queen of England was a fan of beer cheese, and after a trip to Lexington, she even brought some home with her. Speaking of traveling, I'm sure many of you have an amazing trip planned this summer. Maybe you're even going to Germany for the Euros that are going on right now. The whole country has pretty much turned into one big party this past week. And as someone who travels a lot, I know that one of the most annoying things is being abroad and suddenly you can't charge your laptop because the outlet looks completely different and you didn't bring the right adapter. That's why last year I finally got the travel adapter by Epica, and this thing is truly a game changer because this one little adapter is convertible so that it can fit outlets in over 200 different countries. Whether you're in Europe or Korea, UK, Ireland, and Singapore, the US, Canada, or Mexico. And if you're traveling to Australia or China, just twist them like this. Plus, it has 3 USB-C and 2 regular USB plugs, which means that you can charge up to 6 devices at the same time. That's why I even bring this on trips within the US now, because then all I have to do is plug this into the outlet by the nightstand, and then I can charge my phone, my smartwatch, my headphones, and my laptop all at the same time, and this even has the fast charging feature. I also use it here in my office a lot. It has built-in protection against short circuits, overheating, overvoltage, or overpowering scenarios, and it's super compact. But if you need something even smaller, they also have a pocket-sized version. Just go to epicatech.com and use my code FELI15 to save 15% on your purchase, or you can also find Epica on Amazon in the US and in Germany. All the links are down below, and I promise you will never have to worry about which adapter to bring to which country ever again. If you had to summarize Germany's dark past in the 20th century in one person, it would most likely be this guy, Adolf Hitler. Well, even though he was undoubtedly responsible for the downfall of Germany, he wasn't even actually German. He was born in Austria, well, at the time it was the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, in the small town of Braunau am Inn, which is located in Upper Austria, right at the German border next to Bavaria. In 1913, when he was 24, he moved to Munich, which at the time was still part of the German Empire, and he even voluntarily fought for the Bavarian army when World War I started in 1914. Nevertheless, he officially remained an Austrian citizen up until the year 1925. So up until 2 years after the Beer Hall Putsch, where he had tried to overthrow Germany's first ever democratic government, the Weimar Republic. After he requested to have his Austrian citizenship revoked in 1925, he was officially stateless for about 7 years. During this time, he made numerous attempts to obtain the citizenship of one of the German states, because the Weimar Republic didn't have unitary German citizenship, but due to his coup attempt and his time in prison after that, his requests were all denied. Some of his friends in positions of power even secretly tried to use their influence to get him German citizenship, but they all kept failing, which is why this even turned into newspapers publicly mocking Hitler. Every time he tried, there were some people who were against him becoming a citizen, so they blocked the attempts. It wasn't until February of 1932, right before the upcoming elections of the Reichspräsident, that his own party, the NSDAP, came up with yet another plan that gave Hitler a position working for the Free State of Braunschweig, which at the time was one of 2 states governed by the NSDAP. This made him a public official and therefore automatically granted him citizenship in Braunschweig, which finally made him a Reichsbürger, so a German citizen of the Weimar Republic. However, he never actually worked the job that he was supposed to do for Braunschweig, so this was de facto a fake position solely for him to obtain citizenship. And about 1 year later, he became Germany's Reichskanzler, Chancellor, and we all know how that ended. Now, I know that a lot of you probably knew that Hitler wasn't originally German, but I still think it's interesting how one of the most famous Germans in history wasn't even German until he was in his 30s. Next up on our list is a sweet treat that I've been asked about more times than I can count: German chocolate cake. The first time someone asked me about how authentic the German chocolate cake was here in the US, I was kind of confused, because I mean, yes, we have chocolate cake in Germany, but I wasn't really aware of there being one specific type of chocolate cake that was somehow more German or more traditional than others. You can find all kinds of chocolate cakes in Germany. Well, turns out in the US, when people say German chocolate cake, they're specifically referring to this cake right here, which wasn't really something I was familiar with. It's a layered chocolate cake with a coconut pecan frosting and topping, and it's delicious, but nope, it does not originate in Germany. I mean, neither coconuts nor pecans are local to Germany, so these ingredients don't typically show up in traditional German recipes. The real reason that this cake is called German chocolate cake is that it was named after a man called Samuel German, who was an English-American chocolate maker here in the US. Around the year 1852, he had developed a sweet, dark baking chocolate that the company he worked for, Baker's Chocolate, started selling under the name German's Sweet Chocolate. And about 100 years later, in 1957, the Texas newspaper Dallas Morning News published a recipe for German's chocolate cake as their recipe of the day. It was created by a homemaker from Dallas called Mrs. George Clay, and one of the ingredients was German's sweet chocolate. When the corporation that owned Baker's Chocolate at this time, General Foods, found out about this, they distributed the recipe to newspapers all over the country, and it worked. The sales of Baker's Chocolate went up by 70%, and the cake became an American staple. At some point in time, the possessive S in German's chocolate cake was dropped, and people just started calling it German chocolate cake, which is why a lot of Americans today believe that this recipe is originally from Germany. Every year on Christmas, a lot of families here in the US, especially those of German descent, keep up the old German tradition of the Christmas pickle. The Christmas was? Again, this was something that I had never heard of before I came to the US. There were several instances where I met people of German ancestry here in Cincinnati, and they would proudly tell me about how their family has a German last name and how they still do the Christmas pickle tradition every year. Obviously assuming that I knew all about that. Well, I didn't, and turns out only about 7% of all Germans have ever even heard of this tradition. But what even is the Christmas pickle? It's a pickle-shaped ornament that the family is supposed to hide in the Christmas tree. You know, it blends in because it's green, and the first kid to find it gets an extra present, or they will have good luck for the upcoming year, or they get to open the first present. I've heard it different ways. Now, fact is that in modern Germany, this is not a commonly known tradition, and the majority of German families do not own a pickle-shaped Christmas ornament. However, over the last 20 years or so, more and more German ornament makers have heard of this legend, and they started to cater to all of the tourists that come to Germany and ask for the pickle ornaments. So you can actually find them now in some parts of Germany. Unfortunately, it's not clear where this tradition really originated. There's one legend of a German-born soldier who fought in the Civil War here in the US and ended up in prison. He was about to starve to death on Christmas Eve, but a prison guard ended up giving him a pickle and saved his life. Other legends say that the American entrepreneur Frank W. Woolworth brought the pickle to the US when he started to import German Christmas ornaments. Other people say that it used to be a regional tradition in Germany that faded over time. Whether or not any of those explanations are true, nobody seems to know for sure, but the Christmas pickle is definitely not something that my generation or my parents or my grandparents' generation in Germany are familiar with. What are some other things that people believe to be typical for a country that actually aren't from that country at all? One example that comes to mind are Chinese fortune cookies, but let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to get your Epica travel adapter for your upcoming trips and use my discount code down below. And if you enjoy my content, be sure to hit the subscribe button, activate the notifications, and check out my social media channels. And with that, I hope I'll see you next time. Tschüss!